BJ Game Gumbo. I've got my guest here, Daryl Andrews. We're talking spicy hot games, and Steve, you know I'm a Disney nerd.
When you said we have a game we need to talk about, I thought the Disney was coming out first. I mean,
it should have been first, but I'm gonna cool it a little bit. So
I like it.
I'm definitely gonna geek out on this one. My family's worked for Disney. I grew up at Disney. I was there in 1971 or 72. I've been going for years. I want to hear. And you did this one also with Wolfgang Kramer.
Yeah,
tell us about Donald. By the way, I love Steve. If you're an old Disney fan, you're going to love this title because it's Donald Duck in Happy Camper, which is just a callback.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah,
all those great short.
We really wanted
Donald's top billing.
Yeah, I was in shock when this opportunity came around. I will tell you, this came together as a miracle from Maestro Media. I'll talk more about it later, but I've been consulting for them now, coming up to 2 years. And we had the opportunity around this time last year where they told us, hey, next year is Donald Duck's 90th. And if there was any way to pull off a game, we'd give you the opportunity to make that. And we thought, well, the only way we could probably do that in time is if we worked from a game that's already established and then we adapt it. And it has to be the right fit. It has to be a good enough game that we're already working from a good place. And as I mentioned, the last few years, I started working with restoring some of Wolfgang Kramer's older games. And one that I was already working on was an older game that he made called Goldland. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Again, it's 20, 30 years old. It had a very limited release in North America. It has a very iconic cover, actually. That archway. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So people will often recognize that cover.
Yeah, I've seen that cover.
But it was pretty rare to get around. And it came out at the same time as Lost Valley.
Okay.
And has a very similar vibe. The two games were often compared back then. And Lost Valley, I feel like, kind of won in the North American battle, and Goldland kind of won in the Europe battle. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of the landscape back then. And so I, again, was a big fan of it. Loved the idea that in the original game it was a tile exploration game. Wanted to get away from gold, and there's enough games about that. And so when talking with Wolfgang, said, well, what do you think if it was about camping and celebrating the story of Donald? Everyone thinks of Donald as just like angry. But what I love about Donald is Donald's the full range. Donald is loyal, hardworking. He takes in his nephews. Whenever troubles come around, they always work them out. And so when talking to Disney and kind of pitching this idea of just the most classic thing, going camping with your kids, I was like, that to me is Donald. And we really then tied into some of the original films like Good Scout and such that were 90-year-old films and said, well, why couldn't we capture that moment with this game? Echo to the 90 years and echo to even an old-time designer like Kramer, but modernize it just like Donald has been around for a long haul and also is still modern today, still applies today. So we felt like it was a really cool marriage, but only by the fact that everyone at Maestro, all hands on deck, because it's impossible to normally pull off a game in a year.
Sure.
They actually managed to get it printed. We had a pre-order that we just fulfilled or is in fulfillment right now so that we can just squeak in for this year some copies. It'll be in stores in the new year, so it'll probably land, I'm guessing, January, February.
Mass market type thing?
And it hopefully will be at your local game store and maybe some mass markets. Literally, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, the CEO flew to China, and there are videos and pictures of him on the assembly line with our game. So we know they were getting made. We know they're in the mail, but it does take some time.
Daryl, I grew up with the comic books. Steve, I don't know if you did you read any of the Donald Duck comic books? He was actually it wasn't Mickey for me. It was Donald Duck that I followed in the comic books.
Same.
And these scenes of them camping, that's what it was. The Ducks were Huey, Louie, and Dewey were doing the Boy Scout camping, and Donald was out there, and of course there was always Scrooge McDuck too. Evan mentions that, but there was a lot
that would have had to stay. That would have had to stay Goldland.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that was where we were like, okay, Gold and Scrooge are a little attached. It's funny, actually, and I'm really thankful. We got to work directly with Disney, and we would meet with them every week, which was incredible. They would check in, and every little detail, they were working alongside us to make sure we were doing something that was honoring to such, an incredible license has been so long-standing. And they had the great idea of actually, originally it was Daisy instead of Webby. And we were going to have as our character in the line. And they said, well, why don't you go to Webby? Even though Webby came in a little later, what's fun is we have actually Donald is like a round tracker, and he's moving around the camp, and you go out, and if you can get to where Donald is, you get some perk. Okay. But if you can't get to him, you as one of the 4 players, so you get to play as the nephews or as Webby. And so it felt like even more true that it's like the kids are camping, troop leader Donald's out there doing his thing. And does he even notice that the kids are running around and building fires and building camps, and they're incredible at everything. They're earning all their merit badges. And then the week's done for the camping trip, and he's back in the car, and you got to, pair up and head home. And so it just felt like the story was right.
Boxes never, a lot of times the box ages have to do more with the components and everything else. Where do you put this? Is this a family style game? Is this
it is? I mean,
game?
I play tested it. Now I will caveat. I played with some 8 and 9-year-old gamer kids, so kids that grew up in households. That's not always this like 1-to-1 ratio,
right?
But I definitely had a lot of fun with some of my playtesters. I was adamant about, I don't want you just coming and playtesting. I want your kids to come. So we definitely got to playtest this with a nice mix. And then also during our playtesting, a couple of our developers managed to also provide a lot of family playtesting outside. So after the game was made, we really wanted to put it through its paces. So we offered some programs that were online, either through Reddit or other ways, where playtesters were able to print off and playtest the games themselves.
I'm excited. This one actually looks.
I love the look of it. It's modern but timeless. You could see that exact same pose of them marching behind Donald from decades ago. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's going to be